Among the vast ranks of the Adeptus Astartes, few chapters are as defiant of convention or as singularly focused as the Black Templars. They completely disregard the Codex Astartes, the sacred tactical tome authored by Guilliman that governs the organization and operation of nearly every other Space Marine chapter. This rejection is most apparent in their numbers. While a standard chapter is strictly limited to 1,000 warriors, the Black Templars maintain a force of unknown and frankly uncountable size, likely numbering several thousand fighting men. Their true strength is a closely guarded secret, as a chapter of such magnitude operating outside the established doctrines represents a legion in all but name, a fact that draws the constant and wary attention of the Imperial Inquisition. This immense power is not concentrated in one place, but is instead divided across the galaxy into numerous, highly mobile, and self-sufficient fleets known as crusades. This fleet-based nature is the core of their identity. They are eternal nomads with no single homeworld to call their own. Instead, wherever their wars take them, they establish fortified chapter keeps on conquered planets. These grim bastions serve as recruitment centers to replenish their ranks, supply depots to rearm their forces, and vital staging grounds for future campaigns. Each of these crusades is commanded by a warrior known as a marshal, an officer whose authority is equivalent to a captain in a Codex-compliant chapter. These marshals, in turn, answer only to the High Marshal, the supreme commander of the entire Black Templar chapter. The fuel for this unending war is a fiery and fanatical faith that sets them apart from their Space Marine cousins. While most Astartes revere the Emperor as the pinnacle of humanity and a brilliant commander, the Black Templars worship him as a living god. This zealous belief aligns them perfectly with the Imperial Creed and manifests as a burning, uncompromising hatred for all enemies of mankind: the alien, the mutant, the heretic, and the witch. Their views on psychers are particularly severe. They refuse to field librarians among their ranks, a deep-seated mistrust born from a catastrophic event in their distant past known as the Howling. However, they make a critical exception for those individuals they believe are touched by the Emperor's divine will. Astropaths, whose minds carry messages across the void, and navigators who guide their fleets through the treacherous currents of the warp, are treated with special reverence, seen not as witches, but as holy conduits of their god's power. The very creation of the Black Templars was born from a moment of crisis and defiance. In the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, their primarch, Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists, staunchly resisted Guilliman's mandate to shatter the original Space Marine legions into the smaller, 1,000-strong chapters. Dorn's refusal was so absolute that it nearly branded the heroes of the Siege of Terra as traitors and pushed the fragile Imperium to the brink of another civil war. Only at the last possible moment did Dorn relent, allowing his legion to be divided. From the most aggressive, pious, and zealous warriors of the Imperial Fists, the Black Templars were formed. Their first High Marshal, the legendary champion Sigismund, swore a solemn oath to continuously prosecute the Emperor's wars, embarking on a grand crusade to prove the ultimate loyalty of his new chapter, a crusade that has now lasted for 10,000 years. This crusading ethos dictates their entire approach to warfare. The Black Templars are masters of the brutal, close-quarters assault, favoring the charge and the visceral impact of the chainsword over long-range firefights. For them, retreat is anathema. They would rather fight to the last man than give a single inch of ground. This philosophy is perfectly embodied by their signature war machine, the Land Raider Crusader. They pioneered this variant, sacrificing the standard model's anti-tankless cannons for a battery of hurricane-pattern bolters and an expanded troop capacity. Its purpose is simple: to weather the storm of enemy fire, smash through defensive lines, and disgorge a large squad of furious warriors directly into the enemy's heart. Their training methods are equally unorthodox. New recruits, or neophytes, are not sequestered in scout companies, but are instead integrated directly into veteran squads. They learn to fight and die alongside the chapter's finest warriors, believing that the only true training is the crucible of actual combat. The moments before a battle are a sacred time for the Black Templars. As the engines of war prepare to unleash their fury, the entire assembled force is led by the holy figure of the Emperor's champion. In this solemn ritual, these zealous warriors rededicate themselves to their cause, renewing one of their 4 foundational vows. These are not merely words to be recited. They are oaths of action, declarations of intent that become the bedrock of their strategy and directly shape their conduct once the fighting begins. Each vow channels their devotion into a specific and terrifying form of battlefield fury. 2 of their most potent vows are born from a deep and abiding hatred for those they deem impure. When they swear to abhor the witch, destroy the witch, their already intense loathing for psychers is honed to a razor's edge. This hatred is a palpable force, driving them into a frenzy when they face those who channel the corrupting energies of the warp. If an enemy psyker reveals themselves, Templars under this vow will break formation and charge with single-minded fury to eliminate the threat. This overpowering conviction also serves as a powerful mental shield, making them extraordinarily resistant to psychic assaults that would cripple other warriors. Similarly, the vow to suffer, not the unclean to live, expands this sanctified hatred to all enemies of the Imperium. To the Black Templars, the very existence of heretics, aliens, mutants, and traitors is a stain upon the galaxy and an insult to their God Emperor. This vow compels them to prosecute their war with extreme prejudice. They see the destruction of these foes not just as a military objective, but as a spiritual duty, an act of cleansing the universe of filth. On the battlefield, this translates into a relentless and brutal advance, where no quarter is given and no unclean enemy is left standing. The other 2 vows govern their warrior ethos and their absolute commitment to honorable, head-on conflict. To uphold the honor of the Emperor is to swear to be an avatar of his divine strength. Warriors bound by this oath reject the use of cover, viewing it as a coward's tactic. They will stand defiant amidst a storm of enemy fire, their faith a tangible shield that allows them to endure wounds that would fell even other Space Marines. It is a vow of unflinching resolve, demonstrating that the Emperor's chosen are protected by a force greater than any physical armor. Finally, the vow to accept any challenge, no matter the odds, is a promise to embrace the most direct and dangerous path to victory. The Black Templars believe that the ultimate test of a warrior is in the crucible of close combat. When this oath is sworn, they will seize any opportunity to charge headlong into the enemy ranks. They will never refuse a direct challenge, whether from a monstrous beast or an enemy champion, and will always seek to resolve the battle with the righteous fury of their chainswords. It is a declaration that no odds are too great and no enemy too fearsome to be met in glorious personal combat. The history of the Black Templars is forged in the fires of the Imperium's darkest hour and its most bitter internal conflicts. In the immediate aftermath of the Horus Heresy, with the traitor legions shattered and the galaxy saved at a catastrophic cost, a new internal struggle threatened to tear the Loyalists apart. Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, sought to ensure that no single commander could ever again wield the power that Horus had. His solution was the Codex Astartes, a sweeping decree that the great Space Marine legions must be broken apart into smaller, more manageable chapters of only 1,000 warriors. This proposal was met with fierce resistance from Rogal Dorn, the stoic Primarch of the Imperial Fists and the hero who had masterminded the defense of Terra. Having just held the line against the arch-traitor himself, Dorn viewed Guilliman's plan as an insult to the legions that had bled to save humanity. A bitter feud erupted between the two Primarchs. Dorn openly accused Guilliman of cowardice, pointing out his absence during the final, desperate siege of the Imperial Palace. In response, Guilliman, a master statesman and strategist, accused Dorn of heresy, questioning his loyalty for defying a mandate designed to secure the Imperium's future. This wasn't merely a disagreement between two brothers. It was a schism that split the remaining loyalist Primarchs. Leman Russ of the Space Wolves and the noble Vulcan of the Salamanders stood with Dorn, refusing to dismantle their own legions. On the other side, Jagatai Khan of the White Scars and Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard sided with Guilliman, seeing the wisdom in his reforms. The conflict escalated dangerously, moving beyond heated words. Tensions reached a breaking point when an Imperial Navy fleet opened fire on the Imperial Fist Strike cruiser, Terrible Angel. With the Imperium teetering on the edge of a second civil war, one fought between its saviors, Dorn finally made a painful choice. To prevent further bloodshed and preserve the empire he had fought so hard to protect, he acquiesced and agreed to the division of his legion. Dorn's unyielding pride was rooted in the desperate battle for Terra. During that apocalyptic siege, as the forces of chaos hammered at the palace walls, their ranks were bolstered by powerful and monstrous champions swollen with dark power. To counter this, Rogal Dorn created a new role, appointing his finest warrior and first captain, Sigismund, as the first Emperor's champion. Outfitted in the Legion's most formidable armor and armed with its most sacred weapons, Sigismund was tasked with a single, hallowed duty: to seek out the traitor's champions and destroy them in personal combat. He fulfilled this vow with legendary success, challenging and defeating more than 24 of these vile demigods, either killing them outright or banishing their demonic essences back to the chaos of the warp. This legacy of a single, zealous warrior standing against the darkness would become the spiritual cornerstone of the chapter he was destined to command. When the time came for the Imperial Fist Legion to be sundered, a process known as the Second Founding, it was Sigismund, the legendary Emperor's champion, who was tasked with commanding its most aggressive and fanatically devout members. For these chosen warriors, Sigismund's personal philosophy became their chapter's creed. Zeal makes all things possible. Duty makes all things simple. In a display of unity and reverence for their new leader, they forsook the traditional yellow of the Imperial Fists and adopted the stark black and white heraldry that Sigismund himself wore in battle. Thus, the Black Templars were born. This new chapter was one of 4 created from the mighty Imperial Fists. While the Legion's elite veterans remained to carry the name of the Imperial Fists, and its younger members were formed into the Crimson Fists, the Black Templars were forged from a different fire entirely, the fire of pure, unadulterated zeal. A fourth chapter, the Soul Drinkers, was long believed to have been formed from the Legion's orbital assault specialists, though this connection has since been disputed. From the very beginning, Sigismund set his new chapter on a radical path. He saw the Codex Astartes not as a wise precaution, but as a document of restraint, an affront to the aggressive, honor-bound teachings of his Primarch, Rogel Dorn. He would not be bound by its limitations. Instead, he swore a great oath. His Black Templars would never cease their wars. They would prove their loyalty not by garrisoning worlds or following rigid doctrines, but through an eternal, galaxy-spanning crusade. With this vow, they turned their backs on Terra and plunged into the depths of space, taking the fight directly to the enemies of the Emperor. Over the long millennia, the Black Templars' separation from the mainstream Adeptus Astartes has only deepened. Their faith has evolved into a fervent, unwavering belief in the Emperor's divinity, a tenet considered radical by many other chapters. This intense zealotry, combined with their inherent aggression, often unnerves their fellow Space Marines, who see their passion as bordering on the fanatical. Yet, no one can question their effectiveness or their absolute commitment to the destruction of humanity's foes. The oath sworn by Sigismund at their founding has never been broken. It has been renewed by every High Marshal who has succeeded him, a sacred promise that has fueled the longest and most relentless crusade in the history of the Imperium. For 10,000 years, from the legendary wars for Armageddon to countless unnamed conflicts, the Black Templars have honored that vow, carving a path of righteous fury across the stars. For the vast majority of the Imperium, the Great Crusade is an echo of a glorious bygone era, a chapter of history that ended in the fire and betrayal of the Horus Heresy. But for one chapter, that war never concluded. For the Black Templars, the Great Crusade is not a memory to be revered. It is their present and their future. They hold a unique and unyielding belief that they are the sole inheritors of the Emperor's original galaxy-spanning vision: to reclaim every lost human world, to protect the scattered enclaves of mankind, and to bring all of humanity back into the unifying light of the Imperium. This singular, all-consuming purpose has been their guiding star since the moment of their creation. Born from the most zealous elements of the Imperial Fist Legion during the Second Founding, the Black Templars immediately embarked on this righteous path, waging a holy war against any and all who stand as enemies to mankind. Their history is not one of garrison duty or static defense, but a continuous 10,000-year-long offensive. While every battle is a prayer and every campaign a testament to their faith, their eternal crusade is punctuated by conflicts of such monumental scale and breathtaking glory that they have become legends in their own right, whispered with awe across the Imperium. For centuries after the heresy, Sigismund had been a hunter. His Black Templars relentlessly pursued the traitor legions who had fled into the unholy sanctuary of the Eye of Terror, seeking to bring the Emperor's final justice to the architects of that great betrayal. So, when Ezekiel Abaddon the Despoiler finally emerged to launch his first Black Crusade, it was the culmination of Sigismund's life's work. At the Cadian Gate, the primary route out of the Eye of Terror, The vast fleet of the Black Templars under their ancient High Marshal formed the spearhead of the Imperial defense, ready to meet the long-awaited storm. The newly christened War Master of Chaos, Ezekiel Abaddon, knew that to break the Imperial line, he had to break its most legendary champion. He focused his assault on the Black Templars' flagship, the mighty Eternal Crusader, with the clear objective of killing the man who had been the Emperor's champion at the Siege of Terra itself. In the chaos of a brutal boarding action, the two leaders finally met. It was a confrontation for the ages, the first and greatest of the Emperor's champions, now over 1,000 years old, facing the new heir to Horus's dark legacy. The duel was an epic clash of wills and blades. Despite the weight of a millennium on his shoulders, Sigismund fought with the fire and skill that had made him a legend, his determination unwavering. In a masterstroke, he succeeded in driving his black sword deep into Abaddon's chest, inflicting a grievous wound that would forever scar the arch-traitor's body and serve as a permanent reminder of the old warrior's might. However, time and the raw power of chaos were on Abaddon's side. The ancient hero was struck down, his long life finally ending on the blade of his foe. Even as he lay dying, Sigismund had the last word, a final venomous prophecy for the man who had slain him. You will die as your weakling father died, soulless, honorless, weeping, ashamed. Though the Black Templars had lost their founder and were ultimately forced to pull back from the battle, Sigismund's last stand had been decisive. The severity of Abaddon's wound forced the Black Legion to halt their attack on the Eternal Crusader and withdraw to tend to their master. While a tactical defeat, the battle was a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Black Templars and the enduring legacy of their first High Marshal. One of the most defining and catastrophic victories in the Black Templars' long history was their campaign to end the Catalexis heresy. The source of this widespread corruption was a single, monstrous entity known as the Cacodominus. This malevolent alien cyborg had created a sprawling, silent empire built on stolen will, its immense psychic power enslaving the populations of 1,300 different planetary systems. Across this vast swathe of space, free thought was extinguished, replaced by the suffocating presence of one alien mind. It fell to the Black Templars to end this psychic tyranny. In their typically direct and uncompromising fashion, they launched a crusade aimed directly at the heart of the heresy. They fought their way to the Cacodominus itself and, after a brutal campaign, succeeded in striking the creature down. But their victory was the trigger for a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. In its final moment, the Cacodominus did not simply die, it shrieked. This was no sound carried on the air, but a psychic death wail that tore through the fabric of the warp, amplified and distorted into a wave of pure mental destruction that washed across the galaxy. The immediate toll was staggering. 1 billion astropaths across the Imperium died instantly, their minds snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. With these vital psychic communicators gone, interstellar communication was crippled. Worse still, the Astronomicon, the Emperor's guiding light that allows ships to navigate the treacherous void, flickered and dimmed, plunging vast stretches of the galaxy into terrifying darkness. The ripple effects were apocalyptic. Millions of Imperial vessels, suddenly blind and deaf, were lost forever, swallowed by the horrors of the warp, or left stranded in the cold, empty spaces between stars. Entire subsectors of the Imperium, now completely severed from the authority and protection of Terra, collapsed into anarchy. Without guidance, these once stable regions descended into civil war, barbarism, and savagery, their light extinguished for generations. This grim chapter in Imperial history, marked by the silent scream and the chaos that followed, became known as the Howling. For the Black Templars, it was a horrifying and formative lesson. They had destroyed one great evil only to unleash another, confirming in their minds the ultimate poison of the Psyker and the Warp, and forever hardening their crusade against the Witch. During the chaotic 36th millennium, a dark period known as the Age of Apostasy, the Imperium was held in the iron grip of a tyrannical High Lord named Goge Vandyre. While this renegade ruler plunged humanity's heartlands into paranoia and bloodshed, the Black Templars were, for the most part, entirely unaware. True to their nature, their crusade fleets were prosecuting their eternal wars on the distant frontiers of the galaxy, battling aliens and heretics, far removed from the political decay festering on Terra. They were focused on the external enemies of mankind, blind to the cancer growing within. This detachment was shattered when their fleets finally returned to the Segmentum Solar. They did not come home to triumphant welcomes or fortified strongholds. Instead, they found their cherished chapter keeps, their sacred footholds in the Emperor's home system, reduced to nothing but smoldering craters and twisted wreckage. The perpetrators of this sacrilege were not some Xenos race or Chaos warband, but the Frateris Templar, the militant arm of the Ecclesiarchy, acting on the direct orders of Vandyre himself. For the Black Templars, this was an unthinkable betrayal. The outrage was immediate and absolute. In the year 378 of that millennium, High Marshal Sigonandus did not petition for justice or seek an explanation. He declared a new crusade, one not aimed at a distant alien empire, but at the throne world itself. For the Black Templars, this was the Terran Crusade, a holy war to cleanse the Imperium's heart of its deepest corruption. They would not stand idly by while a tyrant defiled the Emperor's domain. Their righteous fury drew powerful allies. Their own progenitor chapter, the venerable Imperial Fists, joined their cause, as did the fanatical Firehawks, the resolute Soul Drinkers, and even specialized units from the Martian Tech Guard. This coalition of wrath and honor brought its full might to bear on Terra, laying siege to the colossal ecclesiarchal palace, Vandyre's fortress and seat of power. The battle for the palace was brutal, shaking the foundations of the throne world. Vandyre's power base began to crumble under the relentless assault. Yet, in the end, the tyrant's reign was not ended by a Space Marine's chainsword. The final blow came from within his own inner circle. Alicia Dominica, a member of his personal bodyguard who would later become the revered founder of the Adepta Sororitas, confronted Vandyre and executed him, ending his terror. For the Black Templars, the Terran Crusade was a grim and vital lesson, a reminder that their duty to defend the Imperium was absolute, and that the most dangerous enemies are sometimes those who claim to serve it. Also, in the 36th millennium, during the wide-ranging Athalor Crusade, Marshal Gervart of the Black Templars made a fateful decision. He diverted a portion of his fleet to the world of Lastrati, a planet famed across the sector as a sanctuary of faith. Lastrati was a major pilgrimage site, renowned for holy places like the Plain of Purity and the Hill of Heretics, monuments to the Imperium's triumph over falsehood. Gervart intended the visit not as a conquest, but as a moment of spiritual reinforcement for his warriors, a chance to witness a world that embodied the unwavering faith they fought to protect. What they found was not inspiration, but a grotesque perversion of everything they held sacred. The world they arrived on was a sickening corruption of its reputation. The holy sites had been transformed into vast, open-air abattoirs. The plane of purity was anything but, now serving as the stage for vile pageants of ritual murder and mass human sacrifice. This was not random slaughter. The populace was consumed by a blasphemous obsession with achieving a form of genetic perfection through these bloody rites. To the battle-hardened Templars, who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer, the scene was utterly abhorrent. The rituals, with their chanting and bloodletting, stank of the foul depravity dedicated to the ruinous powers, regardless of what the inhabitants called their new faith. Marshal Gervart's judgment was as swift as it was absolute. This world's soul was diseased, and the only cure was the flame. He decreed that the Athalor Crusade would not proceed another step until Lastradi was utterly purged of its degenerate populace. For 4 long and brutal years, the Black Templars waged a methodical, grinding campaign of extermination. It was a grim war fought not in trenches or bastions, but across consecrated ground that had been desecrated by its own people. The final act of this tragedy unfolded on the plane of purity itself. The last remnants of Lastradi's defenders were driven back to the Hill of Heretics for their desperate final stand. There, amidst the monuments to a faith they had so hideously betrayed, the Black Templars crushed them completely, eradicating the last of their armies and scouring the planet clean of their heresy. In the late 39th millennium, an Imperial scout fleet rediscovered a lost pocket of humanity on the far fringes of the galaxy, the Julis star system. For centuries, this cluster of worlds had thrived in complete isolation, developing a fiercely independent culture. When the Imperium extended its hand, seeking to integrate Julis into the fold, that hand was violently slapped away. The first missionaries from the Missionarius Galaxia, who arrived to preach the Imperial Creed, were met not with curiosity, but with execution, their deaths a clear and bloody message of defiance. Such an act of rebellion could not go unanswered. The Imperium's response was characteristically unsubtle. A second contingent of priests was dispatched, but this time they came with an escort of Black Templars, led by the formidable High Marshal Ludoldus himself. This was the beginning of the Julis Crusade. The initial stages of the campaign were a resounding success, as the Templars' fleet and warriors systematically broke the outer defenses of the Julis system, conquering world after world. But the crusade ground to a bloody stalemate when it reached the primary planet, Julis Prime. The world was dominated by sprawling, heavily fortified hive cities, each one an urban fortress of incredible resilience. For months, the Black Templars threw themselves against these impregnable walls. Every assault was repulsed with brutal efficiency, and the Templars suffered grievous casualties, their warriors dying in droves against the hive's unyielding defenses. The crusade was on the verge of failure, bogged down in a meat grinder of a siege. The solution came not from a new strategy, but from a new machine. An artificer of the chapter named Simagus, witnessing the failure of their conventional tactics, devised a radical innovation. He took the chassis of the venerable Land Raider battle tank and re-engineered it for a single, brutal purpose: to be the ultimate siege breaker. This new variant, the Land Raider Crusader, sacrificed some of its anti-armor firepower for a blistering array of anti-infantry weapons and, most importantly, was equipped with massively reinforced armor and a larger transport capacity. It was not just a tank, it was a mobile battering ram designed to smash through fortifications and disgorge its cargo of furious Astartes directly into the enemy's heart. With these new engines of war at their disposal, the tactical equation changed overnight. The Land Raider Crusaders thundered across the blasted landscapes, weathering the storm of defensive fire that had halted previous assaults. They smashed through adamantium gates and shattered ferrocrete walls, creating the breaches that Ludaldus's warriors so desperately needed. As the Hive's outer defenses were finally broken, the Crusaders surged through, unleashing squads of Templars deep within the city streets. The tide had turned. One by one, the Hives of Julius fell, and the system was finally brought into Imperial compliance. The Julius Crusade was not only a hard-won victory that reaffirmed the Black Templars' reputation for relentless determination, but it also christened a legendary weapon that would become a signature of their chapter for millennia to come. For 4,000 years, the Black Templars' keep on Cephian IV had been a bastion of strength and a symbol of their victory over the treacherous Alpha Legion. Established in the 37th millennium in the rugged Haraki Mountains, this fortress served a dual purpose. It was a strategic launching point for crusades into the perilous Ghoul Stars, and, just as importantly, a vital recruiting ground. The fierce Marshal clans of Cephian IV provided a steady stream of worthy aspirants, their warrior culture a perfect crucible for forging future knights of the Emperor. But in the early 41st millennium, an old debt came due. Castellan Elbrand's Thunder Crusade fleet arrived in orbit with a simple mission: to gather fresh neophytes to replace losses suffered in a campaign against Chaos cults. On the planet's surface, Chaplain Daver, the stern guardian of the keep, was overseeing the final, brutal trial designed to forge these aspirants into true Astartes, a grueling test of fire deep within the mountains. This routine recruitment, however, was the final move in a game that had been played in the shadows for centuries. The Alpha Legion had never forgotten their defeat on Cephian IV. They had spent millennia subtly corrupting pockets of the population, and, in a masterstroke of misdirection, had forged a temporary and sinister alliance with Drukhari raiders. The first part of the trap was sprung as the exhausted surviving neophytes were being escorted back to safety by a handful of veteran initiates. From the shadows of the mountains, the cruel figures of the Drukhari launched a lightning-fast raid, their goal to capture the promising recruits for their slave pits and bleed the keep's defenders. The outnumbered Templars responded with the desperate fury of cornered lions, fighting to protect their young charges. Chaplain Daver and a small contingent managed to break through the ambush and board a flyer, but as they ascended, a missile screamed from a hidden launcher on the mountainside, crippling their engine. The pilot managed a single, frantic distress call before the gunship spiraled down, crashing in the foothills just kilometers from the fortress. Immediately, a rescue team was dispatched from the keep to recover the survivors, and, just as crucially, the sacred gene seed and relics of the fallen. But as they approached the crash site, they were met not by the wreckage, but by a shambling, horrifying horde of mutants and heretics. The Drukhari raid had been a feint, and the crash a lure. The true enemy now revealed itself. A vast chaos host, led by the unmistakable sigils of the Alpha Legion and orchestrated by a rogue psyker of immense power, surged from the surrounding mountains and threw itself against the walls of the chapter keep. For several days, the fortress was an island of defiance in a sea of hatred. The Black Templars' heavy weapons scythed down the enemy in their thousands, turning the slopes into a meat grinder, but still the tide of chaos pressed on. The defenders held their ground with the indomitable resolve for which their chapter was famous. Realizing that a defensive battle would eventually bleed them dry, Chaplain Daver devised a daring final gambit. He would lead a strike force directly into the heart of the enemy army to cut off its head. In the bloody heart of the battle, Chaplain Daver confronted the rogue Psyker, silencing his warp sorcery forever. Not far away, the Keep's Emperor's champion met a hulking Chaos Defiler in a duel of holy steel against demonic iron, and emerged victorious. With their leaders slain and their dark sorcery broken, the will of the Chaos host shattered. The assault faltered, then broke into a full-scale retreat. But the Black Templars were not content with merely surviving. Seizing the moment, they launched a furious counterattack, surging from their gates to become the hunters. They showed absolutely no mercy. The rout became a slaughter, ensuring that every heretic, mutant, and traitor who had dared to assault their fortress paid for their transgression in blood. When the legendary orc war boss Gazgakul unleashed his Wah, it was like a force of nature, a roaring green tide of violence and crude machinery that crashed down upon the densely populated Declate system. Planet after planet fell to the Horde, their defenses shattered and their populations consumed by the endless war. The first and only line of defense was the Crimson Fists chapter of Space Marines. They fought with the courage and tenacity for which the Sons of Dorn are known, scoring significant initial victories and even pushing the Orcs back on several fronts. But courage alone cannot stem an infinite tide. The sheer, inexhaustible numbers of the Orc horde began to tell. The Crimson Fists were being bled white, their lines stretched to the breaking point. The green tide surged forward again with renewed ferocity, threatening to completely overrun the system's most vital assets, the sprawling hive cities of Declates 5, and, even more critically, the indispensable Forge world of Declates 4. Facing annihilation, the beleaguered chapter sent out a desperate plea for aid. The call was answered by their brothers, the Black Templars. They arrived in force, not merely as reinforcements, but as a promise of retribution. What followed was a remarkable display of brotherhood between two distinct chapters forged from the same genetic stock. In the face of the overwhelming Orc threat, the Astartes of both the Crimson Fists and Black Templars began to fight as one. They formed mixed squads, a Templar's black armor standing beside a Fist's deep blue, and in a powerful gesture of unity, they even exchanged elements of their heraldry. It was a silent, potent declaration that in this war, they were all Sons of Dorn, and they would stand or fall together. This combined might completely turn the momentum of the war. No longer on the defensive, the Astartes launched a series of daring, aggressive counteroffensives, striking deep into Orc-held territory. Their singular goal was to cut the head from the beast. Their relentless campaign culminated in a final, climactic battle where they successfully located and cornered the great war boss himself. There, amidst the fury of battle, Gazgakul was slain. With the death of their leader, the psychic energy holding the Wa together fractured, and the Orc horde collapsed into a disorganized, squabbling mob. The Imperium had won. However, the victory was paid for in the blood of heroes. The the campaign had been horrifically costly, and both chapters had suffered grievous losses fighting against the endless waves of orcs. But their sacrifice was not in vain. Within the Declate system, the warriors of the Crimson Fists and Black Templars are remembered not just as saviors, but as legends. Their joint crusade, a timeless story of brotherhood and courage against impossible odds. On the world of Imperium 9, Castellan Ethelred and his 30 Black Templars faced an army of over 4,000 heretics. This was not simply a mismatched battle, it was a mathematically impossible one. The enemy force, composed of the traitorous 24th Gallimore Astra Militarum, mutineers, and armored cavalry, was a tide of corrupted steel and flesh. With ammunition critically low and the odds stacked hopelessly against them, a direct confrontation would not have been a battle, but a brief and bloody execution. But this was no ordinary army of rebels. These were followers of the blood god, Khorne, driven by an insatiable and maddening need to kill, to spill blood, and to take skulls. And in this, their greatest strength, Castellan Ethelred saw their most exploitable weakness. He devised a strategy that relied not on firepower, but on the unwavering discipline of his warriors and a deep understanding of his foe's corrupted nature. He would not give them the glorious battle they craved. Ethelred ordered a constant fighting withdrawal. For his Templars, an order to retreat, even tactically, must have been a difficult pill to swallow, but their discipline was absolute. They became a phantom force, a taunting shadow that was always visible but never truly engaged. They would appear, offer the briefest hint of combat, and then pull back, denying the bloodthirsty Khornates the satisfaction of a charge or the release of a melee. This was a cruel and calculated denial, dangling the promise of battle just out of reach, again and again. The psychological poison worked perfectly. The Khornates' simmering rage, unquenched by the violence their dark god demanded, boiled over into an uncontrollable frenzy. Denied a true enemy, their insatiable bloodlust had to be fed. They turned on each other. The once cohesive warband descended into a cannibalistic free-for-all, a grotesque orgy of violence where allies slaughtered allies in a desperate fit to appease their own inner demons. In the end, the Black Templars barely needed to fire a shot. The warband effectively committed suicide, drowning the plains of Imperium 9 in their own blood. With the ground force tearing itself to shreds, the final piece of Ethelred's plan fell into place. 2 Black Templar strike cruisers dropped from the warp into high orbit, their guns trained not on the planet, but on the heretic's vessel. They sealed the planet's fate, unleashing a furious orbital bombardment that utterly annihilated the traitors' only means of escape. The Imperium Crusade was a masterpiece of strategy over brute force. It ended with the complete destruction of the Khornate threat, without a single heretic escaping to plague the galaxy further. Ethelred had won not by outfighting his enemy, but by outthinking them, turning their own fanatical devotion into the instrument of their total and ignominious destruction. It seems almost unthinkable that the Imperium's most renowned crusaders would be absent from the launch of a major campaign like the Achilles Crusade into the Jericho Reach. The reasons for this glaring omission were not a matter of strategy or oversight, but of pride, arrogance, and the deeply feudal politics that govern the Imperium. When the crusade was first planned, its high command knew that the support of the Black Templars would be a powerful asset. The delicate task of securing their involvement was given to a fervent but pompous envoy, Prelate Imperialis Nadab Saul. Saul's mission was an unmitigated disaster. Lacking any understanding of the chapter he was addressing, he approached the warrior monks not as a petitioner, but as a superior. Instead of humbly requesting their aid, the prelate made the cardinal error of commanding them, berating their sense of duty and threatening them with disgrace rather than offering the promise of righteous glory. The only record of this ill-fated meeting comes from the memory banks of a servitor, which captured the confrontation's end. Saul being physically thrown from the chamber by enraged Templars, furiously screaming accusations of cowardice and treason, vowing retribution. After that moment, Prelate Saul was never seen again, his fate a mystery buried under layers of sealed inquiries. Years passed, and the crusade struggled. It was only through the quiet diplomacy of their cousin chapters, the Imperial Fists and Crimson Fists, who had sent their own forces to the Jericho Reach, that a bridge was slowly rebuilt. With a new Lord Militant, Tetrarchus, in command of the crusade, a second, far more respectful petition was drafted. Mindful of the grievous insult that had been delivered years prior, and with the backing of their brother chapters, the appeal was finally successful. On the eve of a major offensive into the Acaros salient, Castellan Rama's fighting company arrived like a thunderclap. They were immediately thrown into the vanguard, and their impact was electrifying. They achieved a string of swift, brutal victories, though these were localized triumphs in a much larger, failing war. In a breathtaking display of audacity, Rama and his elite sword brethren boarded the derelict space hulk known as the Bane of Desecration, seized control of the colossal vessel, and used it as a city-sized projectile aimed directly at a heavily defended enemy orbital station. The resulting impact was apocalyptic, obliterating an estimated 500,000 servants of chaos and triggering catastrophic tectonic upheavals on the planet below. But this spectacular victory was an island of success in a sea of strategic failure. The broader campaign in the Acaros salient was faltering badly. Rama's company, having pushed so far and so fast, soon found themselves dangerously overextended and on the verge of being encircled by a massive enemy counterattack. Lord Tetrarchus was forced to order a general retreat back to the fortress worlds of the Iron Collar. In this massive rearguard action, the Space Marine contingents became the unbreakable anchor, and none were more steadfast than the Black Templars. Preventing the retreat from becoming a slaughter, they fought with legendary valor. True to their reputation, they were the very last to pull back. As the darkness of chaos finally consumed the Acaros salient, the last friendly vessel to translate from the warp on the edge of the Karlak system was the strike cruiser Aetolian Gulf, carrying Castellan Rama and his weary warriors. Shortly thereafter, the company was recalled by their High Marshal for a new campaign. The Black Templars would commit no further forces to the Jericho Reach, their supreme commander having judged the Achilles Crusade to have devolved into a stagnant war of attrition, a meat grinder unworthy of his warrior's zeal. On the frozen death world of Schrödinger 7, High Marshal Helbrecht of the Black Templars learned a bitter lesson in humiliation. The conflict began in 930 M41, when the Necron overlord known as Imhotep the Stormlord, Pharaon of the Sautek dynasty, descended upon the Imperial Ice World. Imhotep was not a mindless marauder, but a military genius of ancient and terrible intellect. His invasion was a masterpiece of cold calculation, swiftly driving the planet's defenders into the labyrinthine cryonite mines beneath the ice. Before they were overwhelmed, the Defenders' Astropath choir managed to send a single, desperate cry for help into the void. That cry was answered by Helbrecht. Leading a powerful Black Templar strike force, he descended upon Schrödinger 7, intent on delivering the Emperor's swift and brutal judgment. He planned for a single, overwhelming hammer blow assault, a charge that would shatter the Xenos lines. But Imhotep had not simply invaded the world, he had turned it into a perfectly engineered killing field. He had anticipated the Astartes' response, down to the last detail. The moment the Black Templars' drop pods and Thunderhawks hit their landing zones, the trap was sprung. The icy caverns erupted in a series of meticulously orchestrated ambushes. The ground heaved with explosions, sending warriors from both sides tumbling into rivers of molten cryonite that flowed through the mines. What was meant to be a righteous charge devolved into a chaotic and desperate struggle for survival in a frozen, burning hell of Imhotep's own design. Amidst this chaos, the two commanders found each other. Atop a treacherous ice bridge, slick with frost and heavy with hanging stalactites, Helbrecht and Imhotep met in a brutal contest of wills. The High Marshal fought with the righteous fury of his faith, landing a dozen punishing blows on the Necron Overlord. But where mortal flesh and fury eventually tire, the tireless living metal of the Necron Lord simply endured. For every thunderous strike Helbrecht landed, Imhotep recovered in an instant, countering with cold, precise, and lethally effective attacks. Eventually, the relentless onslaught took its toll. Helbrecht, wounded and exhausted, was outlasted and fell, his blood a stark crimson stain upon the ice. But Imhotep did not grant him a warrior's death. That would have been an honor. Instead, in an act of supreme and calculated contempt, the Necron Overlord brought his glowing scythe down not on Helbrecht's neck, but on his right hand, severing it completely as a permanent mark of his defeat. As Helbrecht roared in a mixture of agony and incandescent rage, Imhotep coldly kicked him from the bridge, sending him tumbling to the cavern floor far below. The High Marshal's fall galvanized the remaining Black Templars. They fought with renewed ferocity, not for victory, but for their leader. They formed a defensive perimeter around the fallen Helbrecht, retrieved his broken body, and began a disciplined, fighting withdrawal through the Necron lines. Though they saved their marshal, they could not save the world. They were forced to abandon Schrödinger 7, leaving it in the cold, silent grip of Imhotep the Stormlord, and taking with them the bitter memory of a catastrophic defeat and a deep, personal, and burning desire for vengeance. When the largest orc wag since the fabled War of the Beast descended upon the world of Armageddon, the Black Templars were sent not to win the war, but to hold a single, vital point against the apocalypse. The architect of this green-skinned apocalypse was the infamous warlord Gazakul Mag Uruk Thraka, and his target was total conquest. In the face of this overwhelming threat, the High Command assigned the Black Templars a seemingly suicidal mission: the defense of Hell's Reach Hive. The task fell to the grim and resolute Chaplain Grimaldus, who, with just 100 of his battle brothers, was ordered to hold one of the planet's primary industrial hearts, or die trying. But they would not stand alone. In the crucible of Hell's Reach, a grand alliance of Imperial might was forged. The Black Templars stood as the stoic core of a defense that included the planet's own grim defenders, the regiments of the Armageddon Steel Legion, and countless other Astra Militarum forces. Towering over the battlefield were 19 god machines from the Legio Invigilata, their thunderous cannons a counterpoint to the endless orc roar. Even the Hive's own people took up arms in desperate militias, fighting alongside the 97 famously devout battle sisters of the Order of the Argent Shroud. Together, this coalition faced a relentless siege, a brutal, close-quarters meat grinder where every street and hab block was contested with savage ferocity. Under Grimaldus's iron-willed command, the defenders of Hell's Reach did more than just survive. They endured. They fought tooth and nail against a seemingly infinite tide of greenskins, their courage and sacrifice preventing the Hive's total annihilation. Wave after wave of orcs crashed against their lines and broke. This unbreakable defense became the anvil upon which Ghazghkul's grand invasion was shattered for a second time. Frustrated and having suffered immense losses for no decisive gain, the great warlord was ultimately forced to abandon his campaign, fleeing Armageddon to lick his wounds and plot his next move. In the war's aftermath, a solemn and legendary oath was sworn. High Marshal Helbrecht, Supreme Commander of the Black Templars, stood beside the grizzled Commissar Yarrick, the old hero known to the orcs as the bane of their race. Together, they vowed that this would not be the end. While the Imperium celebrated its hard-won victory, Helbrecht declared that his own personal crusade had just begun. He would hunt the great beast across the stars and would not rest until Ghazghkul's head was his. The Somnus Crusade is not a tale of glorious conquest, but a bitter story of vengeance, humiliation, and an unfinished hunt. It is a raw wound in the honor of the Black Templars, personified by the orc warlord Grimguts, a brutal chieftain who has become a walking mockery of everything the chapter holds sacred. This bitter feud began when Grimguts and his Bloodscar tribe orchestrated a devastating assault on the Black Templars chapter, Keep on the World of Somnus. In response, Marshal Brandt declared the Somnus Crusade, a holy war of retribution. The crusade joined the raging fires of the war on Armageddon with a single, overriding objective: to find and kill the warlord who had dared to strike their home. On the battlefields of Armageddon, they came agonizingly close to achieving their goal. They cornered Grimguts, but in the brutal ensuing battle, the warlord not only survived his grievous injuries, but also managed to capture the Crusade's revered Emperor's champion, Alaric. What followed was the ultimate insult. The barely living orc was rebuilt into a hulking cyborg monstrosity, his mangled body augmented with crude and powerful machinery. To the Black Templars' eternal shame, much of this cybernetic hardware was scavenged from their own stolen war gear, desecrated and repurposed to give new life to their most hated enemy. The capture of a living icon like Alaric and the desecration of his war gear was a dishonor that could not be borne. In response, the ancient and venerable dreadnought Gerlach took matters into his own sarcophagus-encased hands. He organized a specialized strike force, a team of dedicated hunters given the fitting name Alaric's Avengers. Their mission was singular and sacred: find the captured Emperor's champion and reclaim the holy black sword and armor of faith he carried. Their first attempt at a rescue, however, was a failure. They could not free their brother, but the mission was not a total loss. In their search, they stumbled upon an unexpected discovery: the venerable dreadnought Remus of the Crimson Fists, a long-lost hero who had been missing in the frozen Deadlands since the Second War for Armageddon. Furthermore, Gerlach's team located and destroyed a massive orc stompa that had been buried in the ice since that same long-ago war. By neutralizing this dormant war machine before it could be reactivated, they scored a vital tactical victory, preventing a major threat from joining the current war effort. Despite these small victories, the primary objective remains unfulfilled. The Somnus Crusade continues its relentless campaign across the war-torn plains of Armageddon. Alaric's Avengers still hunt in the shadows. For them, this is more than just a war. It is a matter of honor that can only be settled in blood, a quest to rescue their captured brother, and a vow to finally destroy the cyborg warlord who wears their shame as his armor. When Ezekiel Abaddon the Despoiler tore open the Eye of Terror and unleashed his 13th Black Crusade, the largest mobilization of forces the galaxy had seen since the Horus Heresy itself, the Black Templars did not wait to be assigned a battlefront. They forged their own. As the fortress world of Cadia became the epicenter of a galaxy-burning war, a Black Templars crusade fleet moved to relieve the beleaguered world of Thracian Primaris. Their intervention was a clinical and brutal display of naval power, smashing the attendant Chaos war fleet with an efficiency that bordered on contemptuous. Following this victory in the void, they made an uncontested planetfall, their warriors establishing a beachhead outside the vast logistical complex of Hive Demeter. The grateful citizens of Thracian Primaris hailed the Templars as saviors, ready to celebrate their deliverance. But the Black Templars did not linger for parades or accolades. Such earthly concerns are meaningless to them. Their holy purpose was not to liberate a single world, but to pursue the great enemy, to harry the forces of chaos and drive the entire traitor host back into the hell from which it had spawned. Their eyes were already fixed on the next battle, the next step in their eternal war. But the galaxy grants no respite, and one cataclysm often serves to mask another. As they prepared to depart Thracian Primaris, alarming intelligence reached their fleet. Far away in the Scarus sector, a new and equally dire threat was gathering momentum. The notorious orc warlord Gazkul, Mag Uruk Thraka, was launching his own Green Crusade. The Black Templars were battered and depleted from the fighting, their numbers severely diminished. But they understood the terrifying mathematics of an unchecked Wah. To allow Gazkul's orcs the time to gather their full strength would be to condemn the entire Scarus sector to annihilation. And so, without hesitation, the Black Templars turned their crusade towards a new war. They set a course for the Scarus sector, their diminished fleet, a grim testament to the price of their recent victory. Yet their resolve was as unyielding as ever. This was not a strategic redeployment. It was a perfect embodiment of their spirit. Driven not by a quest for glory, but by the solemn weight of their duty, they sailed from one desperate battlefront to the next, forever committed to protecting the Imperium and destroying its enemies, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. In the chaotic new age of the Era Indomitus, with the galaxy torn in half by the Great Rift, the fortress world of Gidisk in the Taladis system was dying. Its primary stronghold, the nigh impregnable citadel known as the Fortress Resolve, was encircled by the master siege-breakers of the Iron Warriors. Under the dark gaze of the Wordbearer's infamous apostle, Cor Pharon, 6 traitor legions had brought their full, malevolent might to bear. Day and night, the Citadel's shields buckled under relentless orbital bombardment, while demonic hordes surged against its walls like a tide of screaming flesh. Into this desperate siege came Castellan Dromus and his Rutheran crusade. Arriving with his Gladius strike force, Dromus didn't waste time on grand speeches or futile charges. He listened to the tactical feeds from the beleaguered defenders and looked past the immediate, overwhelming threat of the siege lines. He saw the true source of the enemy's strength, the linchpin holding their entire assault together, a monstrous demon forge known as the Soul Harvester Scarax Crowd. This infernal, living factory was vomiting forth an endless tide of demonic war engines and reinforcements, allowing the Iron Warriors to replace their losses almost instantly. Dromus knew that as long as that hellish heart continued to beat, the fortress resolve was doomed. The plan he devised was a masterpiece of suicidal bravery, a multi-pronged assault that relied on perfect timing and absolute faith. To draw the enemy's attention, the Imperial Knights of House Morton, led by the stoic Sir Dirkwald, would launch a direct frontal assault. Their colossal landers plunged through a curtain of enemy fire, and the knights charged the Soul Harvester head-on, their heavy cannons blazing. While this thunderous diversion occupied the Iron Warriors, the true strike began. High above, Black Templar inceptors of Strike Force Dawn. Hammer became streaks of black fire, plunging from the heavens. They slammed into the pulsating flesh metal shell of the Demon Forge, planting powerful demolition charges even as fire-spitting Helldrakes swarmed to intercept them. They tore a ragged wound in the beast's hide. This was the moment for the final, decisive blow. Castellan Dromus himself led a retinue of his most seasoned crusaders directly into the breach. They plunged into the nightmarish innards of the living machine, a hellscape of grinding pistons, screaming souls, and flesh metal corridors. They fought with grim determination against the Iron Warriors defending the machine's heart, suffering horrific casualties with every step they took deeper into the mechanical monstrosity. Finally, bleeding and battered, Dromus and his command squad reached the core. There, they planted their ultimate weapon, a cyclonic charge. The detonation was an incandescent bloom of warp energy that ripped through the Soul Harvester from the inside out. Dromus and his surviving warriors were consumed in the very fire they had unleashed, a final, selfless sacrifice. The blast annihilated the charnel factories and assembly halls, causing the entire Demon Forge to convulse like a mortally wounded beast. Yet, even in death, the Soul Harvester proved resilient. Though crippled, its demonic furnaces continued to burn deep within its core. Castellan Dromus had not won the war, but his heroic sacrifice had bought the defenders of Giddisk what they needed most: time. The Chaos assault stalled, its source of endless reinforcements choked off. He had bought them a breath of air in a flooded room, but the war for their world and its ultimate fate was far from over. The greatest secret of the Black Templars is not found in a holy text or a battle plan. It is a number. While the Codex Astartes and the Decree of Robudi Guilliman strictly limit a Space Marine chapter to 1,000 warriors, a measure to prevent any single commander from ever again wielding the power that Horus did, the Black Templars operate on a scale that is almost unique in the Imperium. They are a legion in all but name. While only the High Marshal knows their true strength, whispers and guarded estimates within the Inquisition place their numbers at nearly 6,000 Space Marines. Such a force, if ever gathered in one place, would be a nearly unstoppable power, a fact that deeply troubles the more puritanical members of the Inquisition, who see in it the potential for a new rebellion. This sprawling, uncountable chapter is managed not from a single homeworld, but from the command decks of its many crusade fleets. The Black Templars are perpetual nomads, a mobile empire of warships and warriors forever prosecuting the Emperor's wars. To sustain this lifestyle, they have established a galaxy-spanning web of fortresses. On every world they conquer or reclaim, they erect a chapter keep. These grim citadels serve as recruitment centers, training grounds, and staging posts for their crusades. When a fleet moves on, these keeps are often left dormant, silent, and empty, sleeping strongholds waiting for their masters to return. Woe betide any squatters or interlopers who might be found within when the Templars inevitably come back to reclaim what is theirs. The chapter's power is divided among these crusade fleets, each a self-sufficient army commanded by a warrior with the title of Marshal, a role equivalent to a captain in a standard chapter. There are typically at least 3 major crusades active at any one time, though in times of great crisis, that number has been known to swell to as many as 14. The size of these crusades can vary dramatically, from a small surgical strike force of 100 Astartes to a massive armada with the strength of several full companies. Overseeing this entire structure is the High Marshal, currently the vengeful Helbrecht, who travels between the fleets aboard his flagship, the legendary battle barge Eternal Crusader. On the battlefield, this rejection of rigid doctrine continues down to the squad level. Black Templar fighting formations are fluid, forming and disbanding based on the needs of the battle and the bonds of camaraderie forged in endless war. A typical squad consists of 5 to 10 fully trained initiates, often accompanied by an equal number of neophytes who learn their craft in the crucible of combat. There are no designated sergeants. Instead, warriors who distinguish themselves through experience and zeal are elevated to the ranks of the Sword Brethren, an elite cadre who act as leaders and champions within the companies. This focus on brutal, close-quarters combat also means that dedicated heavy weapons units, like Devastator squads, are a profound rarity. Perhaps their most defining characteristic, however, is a deep and abiding hatred for the mutant, the witch, and the warp. This intense aversion is more than just distrust. It is a core tenet of their faith. As a result, the Black Templars have no librarians and maintain no librarius to house psychic lore. The only psychers they will ever willingly fight alongside are the Grey Knights, whose direct genetic link to the Emperor and legendary incorruptibility places them above the Templars' blanket condemnation. They see it as an honor to stand with warriors so pure that they have never once, in 10,000 years, fallen to the temptations of chaos, a claim even the zealous Black Templars cannot make. This rigid dogma creates a unique challenge for those Templars chosen to serve in the Death Watch, where they are forced to adapt and fight in kill teams alongside the very librarians their chapter so utterly despises. Within the unique structure of the Black Templars, several specialized ranks and formations exist that have no direct equivalent in chapters that slavishly follow the Codex Astartes. The title of High Marshal is more than just a rank. It is the embodiment of the Black Templars' unending war. This individual is the supreme leader of the entire chapter, a position comparable to a chapter master in a more conventional Astartes force. To earn this title, a warrior must first be a legend in his own right. His personal history is a litany of slain monsters and vanquished arch-heretics, and his skill in combat is expected to be peerless. He is a master of the blade, the bolter, and the brutal art of close-quarters combat where most Templar battles are ultimately decided. But raw killing power is not enough. The High Marshal must be a brilliant strategist, a commander whose mind has been forged in the crucible of 1,000 battlefields, making life-or-death decisions in the heart of the storm. He carries the accumulated wisdom of every High Marshal before him, yet tempers it with his own hard-won experience. He is also the sacred guardian of the chapter's traditions, laws, and deepest secrets, entrusted with the weight of their entire 10,000-year legacy. What truly sets the High Marshal apart, however, is his extraordinary autonomy. He does not answer to the High Lords of Terra or the dictates of Segmentum Command. He, and he alone, decides where the fury of the Black Templars will be unleashed, free from any external command or political interference. As the supreme commander of all the chapter's crusades, he is the grand architect of their galaxy-spanning war, setting their objectives and guiding their path. While he often directs the crusades from afar aboard his flagship, his rare appearances on a battlefield are momentous events. His personal presence is a living embodiment of the Crusade's holy purpose, capable of inspiring his warriors to feats of impossible valor. In the end, the High Marshal is three things at once. He is the chapter's deadliest warrior, its supreme strategic mind, and the sacred guardian of its storied history. He carries the weight of their past and directs the course of their unending war. Marshals. At the head of each Black Templar Crusade fleet stands a marshal. In the rigid hierarchy of a Codex-compliant chapter, he would hold the rank of captain, but for the Black Templars, the title carries a weight all its own. This is not a role for the inexperienced or the faint of heart. A marshal is a veteran of countless wars, a commander whose tactical insight and raw battlefield experience are second only to the High Marshal himself. While every marshal is expected to be a phenomenal warrior, capable of besting almost any foe the galaxy can throw at him in personal combat, his true test lies in command. It is one thing to win a duel. It is another entirely to guide a fleet across hostile space, manage the complex logistics of a moving army, and inspire thousands of warriors to achieve the impossible against overwhelming odds. The path to this rank is a long and bloody one. A Templar must first prove his absolute dedication and peerless leadership, typically by serving with distinction as a Castellan in command of a fighting company, or by earning a place within the elite ranks of the Sword Brethren. In the end, the Marshal is the will of his crusade made manifest, the linchpin holding the entire war effort together. He is entrusted with the sacred duty of seeing his campaign through to its bloody, victorious conclusion, no matter the cost or the enemy. Castellan. When a Black Templar's crusade grows to a truly massive scale, encompassing the strength of several full companies, a single marshal cannot command every engagement. In the heat of these vast battles, a vital link in the chain of command is needed, a leader who can direct the fighting on a specific front. This is the role of the Castellan. His authority is roughly equivalent to that of a lieutenant in a Codex-compliant chapter, but his responsibility is to command an entire fighting company, the core tactical formation of the Black Templars. A Castellan is not appointed lightly. He is always chosen from the chapter's most veteran warriors, a battle-hardened leader who has already proven his absolute devotion and his ability to lead men into the most hellish of fights. This promotion is almost exclusively granted to members of the elite Sword Brethren, ensuring that every Castellan is not only a seasoned commander, but also one of the chapter's finest duelists and warriors. On the battlefield, a Castellan leads from the very front, his presence a rallying point for the warriors under his command. He is far more than a simple officer giving orders. He must be able to read the chaotic flow of a battle in an instant, shifting his company's position or objective to exploit a sudden weakness or counter a new threat. His men respect and follow him, not just because of his rank, but because they have witnessed his prowess and his courage firsthand. Ultimately, a Castellan is the living embodiment of the Black Templar ideal at the company level. He is a teacher of the brutal art of the kill, his every action a lesson for the warriors who follow him. He is a focal point of zeal and fury, a warrior whose personal example inspires the Templars under his command to push past their limits and uphold the sacred legacy of Sigismund and the Emperor. Sword Brethren. Every Black Templar is a zealous and deadly warrior, but to be a Sword Brother is to reach the pinnacle of the chapter's art of war. These are the elite of the elite, the veteran warriors who have proven their skill and devotion beyond any doubt. In recognition of their status, which is comparable to the first company of a Codex chapter, they are inducted into the Marshal's personal household, forming a cadre of his most trusted and deadliest champions. Upon reaching this esteemed rank, their duties change. They are no longer tasked with the training of neophytes. Their purpose is now to master the most powerful and sacred war gear in the chapter's armory. They are given extensive training in the use of tactical dreadnought armor, and whenever a suit of this revered Terminator plate is available, it is a Sword Brother who dons it. Clad in this nigh impenetrable plate, they wade into the enemy's ranks, typically armed with thunder hammers or lightning claws, a choice that perfectly reflects their chapter's love for brutal, decisive, close-quarters battle. On the battlefield, they do not need the rigid structure of a formal squad. They are a tide of elite warriors who instinctively find the most critical point of the battle, the heart of the heaviest fighting, the breach in the wall, the enemy's command squad, and throw themselves at it with righteous fury, leading by an example of sheer martial prowess. It is from this pool of exceptional warriors that new leaders are forged. When a marshal falls in battle or is elevated to the rank of High Marshal, his replacement is chosen from the ranks of the Sword Brethren. This is not decided by council or vote, but by a brutal trial of ritual combat. The Sword Brethren face each other in a series of duels, and the last warrior standing earns the right to lead the crusade. This victory must, however, be ratified by the High Marshal, a right he has only ever been known to exercise once in the chapter's entire history, in a famous incident known as the Gervart Repeal. To mark their esteemed position, Sword Brethren are distinguished by their war gear. They often wear cream-colored cloaks over their black power armor, and their pauldrons are trimmed with a stark martial red. These simple honors mark them as the finest warriors in a chapter of legendary fighters. Emperor's Champion. The night before a great battle is a time of solemn ritual for the Black Templars. As their brothers sharpen their blades and check their bolters, some will engage in deep prayer, fasting, and meditating on the war to come. In this state of heightened devotion, it is not uncommon for one battle brother to be struck by a powerful, holy vision of the coming conflict. He sees not the chaos of the melee, but his specific duty within it, a vision of the enemy's greatest champions and the righteous path he must walk to slay them. This brother then seeks out the Crusade's chaplain. He confesses his vision, and the chaplain, a stern judge of faith, must determine if the calling is true. If the vision is deemed worthy, the battle brother is set apart from his peers. He is no longer just a warrior, he is declared the Emperor's champion. In a sacred ceremony, he is ritually armed, donning the hallowed armor of faith and taking up the black sword, a master-crafted blade reserved for this holy purpose. His new, singular mission is now clear: to be a living beacon of the Emperor's wrath, to seek out the mightiest enemy leaders on the field, and to cut them down in single combat, inspiring his brethren to impossible acts of valor. This sacred tradition is not a recent invention. It is a legacy born in the fires of the Imperium's greatest battle. During the climax of the Siege of Terra, as the Emperor himself prepared to board the traitor War Master's flagship, Rogel Dorn appointed his finest warrior, First Captain Sigismund, to lead the defense on the ground. Dorn bestowed upon him the title of Emperor's Champion. Sigismund was given the finest war gear the Legion possessed and swore an unbreakable oath to hunt down and destroy the champions of chaos. In the brutal fighting that followed, he did just that, seeking out and slaying over 24 enemy leaders in personal combat. The man who would go on to become the first High Marshal of the Black Templars set the ultimate standard for what it means to be the Emperor's chosen warrior. This divine calling is so profound that it follows a Black Templar even when he is far from his chapter. In theory, each crusade has a single champion for a campaign, but in practice, the will of the Emperor is not so easily contained. A new champion may arise for any significant battle if the need is great enough. Even a Templar serving in the Death Watch will continue the ritual of prayer and fasting before a mission. If a vision comes to him there, far from a Templar chaplain, he takes up the mantle alone. He declares his holy purpose and petitions the Master of the Armory for the use of the Watch Fortress's most potent relics. Such a request is almost never denied, for the divine certainty and burning zeal in the warrior's eyes are all the proof required. His sacred duty is only considered fulfilled when his vision is complete, and upon his return, a chaplain's word can finally release him from his oath, allowing him to rejoin the ranks as a humble battle brother once more. Initiate. In the lexicon of the Black Templars, the title of Initiate is a source of pride, not a mark of inexperience. An initiate is a fully fledged battle brother, a warrior who has survived his trials as a neophyte and has earned the right to wear the sacred black power armor. They are the backbone of every crusade, the vast majority of warriors who form the fighting companies and prosecute the Emperor's wars across the galaxy. They are the line breakers and the defenders of the faith, filling every tactical role required on the battlefield. However, the duty of an initiate is twofold, a sacred responsibility that sets the Black Templars apart from almost every other chapter. He is not just a warrior, he is also a mentor. In a unique master and apprentice tradition, each initiate takes a single neophyte under his personal tutelage. The neophyte learns the art of war not in a sheltered training cage, but by fighting at his mentor's side in the heart of battle. The initiate is responsible for his charge's survival, his martial training, and his spiritual indoctrination. This intense personal mentorship forges an unbreakable bond and ensures that the chapter's traditions and martial prowess are passed down directly in the crucible of combat. An initiate's duty to his apprentice is only discharged when the neophyte is finally deemed worthy to become an initiate himself. For the initiate, this path of service as the Crusade's core fighting strength continues until his own deeds and zeal earn him a place among the chapter's elite, the Sword Brethren. Neophyte. For a young warrior in almost any other Space Marine chapter, the final implantation of the gene seed organs is a moment of triumph. It marks the end of his grueling trials and his ascension to the ranks of the Battle Brothers. For a Black Templar, it is merely the opening of a door to a much harsher school. A neophyte in the Black Templars is already a full Astartes in body. He possesses the superhuman strength, speed, and resilience of a Space Marine. But in the eyes of the chapter, his transformation is incomplete. His flesh is that of an angel of death, but his spirit has not yet been forged into the unyielding iron of a true crusader. His real training begins when the chaplains and apothecaries declare him physically ready. He is not sent to a scout company to learn in the shadows. Instead, he is assigned as an apprentice to a single, full initiate. In this ancient master and squire relationship, the neophyte learns his craft not from a manual, but from direct experience. He fights at his master's side, witnesses his acts of faith, tends to his war gear, and learns to kill the enemies of the Emperor in the most direct and brutal way possible. His classroom is the bloody chaos of the battlefield, and his final exam is survival. There is no set timeline for this apprenticeship. A neophyte becomes an initiate only when his mentor deems him ready, when he has proven his courage, his skill, and his unwavering zeal. Once promoted, the newly made initiate is soon given a sacred duty of his own. He takes on a neophyte apprentice, and the timeless cycle of mentorship, trial, and brotherhood begins anew. Crusader Squad. The core of any Black Templar's army, the very instrument through which they deliver the Emperor's wrath, is the Crusader Squad. This is the fundamental fighting formation of the chapter, a flexible and aggressive unit that perfectly reflects their complete rejection of the rigid doctrines laid out in the Codex Astartes. These squads are the backbone of every strike force and the heart of every crusade, forming the bulk of the chapter's fighting strength. Composed of the chapter's fully trained battle brothers, known as initiates, these squads are not organized with the cold, tactical precision of a standard Space Marine squad. Instead, they are brotherhoods of warriors bound by shared experience and a common, zealous purpose. While they do not have formal sergeants, it is a great honor for a Crusader squad to be led into the fray by a member of the Sword Brethren. The presence of one of these elite veterans is more than just tactical leadership. It is a spiritual boon. His personal example of martial perfection inspires the initiates around him to fight with even greater fury, as he leads not from the rear, but from the very tip of the spear. While the Holy Bolter is the standard issue weapon for every initiate, it is often treated as little more than a tool to be used while closing the distance to the enemy. The true spirit of a Black Templar is unleashed not at range, but in the brutal, righteous chaos of close combat. Reflecting this preference, many initiates eagerly charge into battle, wielding roaring chainswords and other deadly melee weapons. For them, true zeal is expressed face to face, looking the enemy in the eye as they deliver the Emperor's final judgment with a blade. The Black Templars' doctrine of war is not learned from a book. It is forged in the heart of their eternal crusade. As a fleet-based chapter, their recruitment and training methods are as nomadic and unforgiving as their lifestyle. Lacking a single homeworld, they rely on a sprawling network of chapter keeps, established on worlds they have conquered or liberated. These grim fortresses are their only anchor, serving as recruitment centers where they select a mere handful of the most skilled and zealous aspirants each year. One such world, Barbarossa IV, is famed for the brutal northern regions that serve as a proving ground for those who would become Templars. These hopefuls, known as expectanten, often come from the ranks of local defense forces, dreaming of joining the legendary Crusaders. Once an aspirant passes the initial brutal trials, they are implanted with the chapter's gene seed and begin their physical transformation. Yet, even after their bodies have been remade into those of a superhuman Astartes, their journey has just begun. In the Black Templars, this only marks a warrior's promotion to the rank of neophyte, the point at which their true training commences. Groups of new neophytes are gathered from the keeps and transported to a crusade fleet, where they are thrown into a crucible of trials designed to break the weak. Here, the Black Templars' unique master and apprentice system takes over. They have no scout company. Instead, an initiate, a full battle brother, will observe the trials and may choose a neophyte to take under his personal wing. A sacred oath is sworn between them. The initiate vows to be the neophyte's mentor, to teach him the art of war, the history of their chapter, and the holy rites of emperor worship. The neophyte, in turn, swears absolute obedience and vows never to bring dishonor upon his master. He serves his initiate in all things, from daily routines to the heart of battle, learning not in a training cage, but by fighting at his master's side. If an initiate falls, another brother will take up the training, for the bond is sacred. Should a neophyte perish, his master will often swear a death oath, a solemn vow to avenge his fallen apprentice or die in the attempt. Only when the initiate deems his charge ready does the neophyte face the final trials of purity before the chaplains. Success earns him a suit of power armor and the full rank of initiate, at which point the cycle begins anew, as he will one day take on a neophyte of his own. This doctrine shapes their entire approach to warfare, a style established by Sigismund himself that favors the brutal finality of close-quarters combat over ranged firefights. The righteous fury of a Black Templar initiate is a tangible weapon, making them aggressive and impulsive on the battlefield. They hurl themselves at the enemy with focused brutality, their battle oaths a thunderous roar as they tear their foes apart. This is especially true when facing the enemies they despise most, the alien, the witch, and the heretic. A Black Templar's crusade typically employs one of two primary tactics. The first is a devastating orbital assault, using drop pods and thunderhawks to strike like a thunderbolt after a heavy bombardment. If resistance remains, they switch to the second tactic, a massive armored spearhead aimed at the enemy's weakest point. This preference for breaking the enemy's line and delivering warriors directly into the melee led to one of their most famous innovations. During the grueling sieges of the Julius Crusade, the chapter developed the Land Raider Crusader. By sacrificing the standard model's heavy anti-tankless cannons for side-mounted Hurricane bolters, they created a line-breaking assault tank with a significantly larger transport capacity, perfectly designed to smash through fortifications and disgorge a large squad of furious Templars into the heart of the enemy. The design was so brutally effective that news of its success spread, and it was eventually adopted by chapters across the Imperium. This uncompromising worldview extends to a profound and zealous hatred for the warp. Consequently, the Black Templars refuse to field librarians or fight alongside any psychers. This deep-seated prejudice often causes friction with other imperial organizations like the Inquisition and Astra Militarum. The sole, revered exception to this rule is the Grey Knights. The Templars see it as a high honor to fight alongside these incorruptible warriors whose gene seed comes directly from the Emperor and who have never once succumbed to the temptations of chaos. This rigid dogma creates a severe test for those Templars seconded to the Death Watch. In the service of the Ordo Xenos, these warriors must find a way to serve in kill teams alongside the very psychers their chapter abhors. The mental strain of tolerating the varied beliefs of other chapters, let alone the presence of a librarian, tests a Templar's faith to its absolute limit. For this reason, only their most disciplined and open-minded warriors are chosen for this duty. Their natural aggression and refusal to retreat can compromise missions that require stealth. Yet, on the battlefield, this same righteous zeal becomes their greatest weapon, allowing them to face down the most terrifying alien horrors the galaxy has to offer. While all Space Marines are defined by their loyalty, the faith of a Black Templar is a different and far more ferocious beast. Where most Astartes revere the Emperor as the pinnacle of humanity and their rightful leader, the Black Templars worship him as a literal god. This single, radical belief, shared with the common mortals of the Imperium, is the bedrock of their existence and the fuel for a fanaticism that often unnerves their fellow Space Marines. Their entire purpose, the endless crusade that has defined them for 10,000 years, is an ongoing act of worship and a quest to prove their ultimate loyalty. This divine conviction naturally breeds an absolute and uncompromising hatred for any who would defy their god. Their loathing for the heretic, the mutant, and the alien is legendary, a direct inheritance from their founder, Sigismund. As the first Emperor's champion, Sigismund personally delivered final judgment upon the traitors of the Horus heresy, and that sacred duty to prosecute such crimes is now the driving force behind every Black Templar. When one of their champions strikes down an enemy leader, he is not merely winning a battle, he is reenacting the holy judgment of Sigismund, and, through him, the Emperor himself. This profound hatred of the unclean is most intensely focused on the Witch. The mere presence of a rogue psyker on the battlefield drives them into a righteous fury against which few enemies can stand, as captured in their vow. Smite now the scions of the Witch. We ask it in the spirit of wrath, O Master of mankind. However, outsiders often misinterpret this as a blanket intolerance for all psychers. This is not true. The Black Templars hold a special reverence for astropaths, seeing them as holy disciples who have directly communed with their god. Navigators are likewise honored, for it is their psychic sight that perceives the divine light of the Astronomicon, allowing the Crusade fleets to bring the Emperor's retribution to the darkest corners of the galaxy. Their abhorrence is reserved for those who draw power from the warp. the deviant witches and sorcerers who risk becoming conduits for demons and plunging entire worlds into damnation. This fierce distrust of the warp is the reason the chapter has no librarians. The exact cause of this is a mystery lost to time. Some scholars whisper that the chapter's gene seed may have deteriorated, while others point to the apocalyptic psychic death scream of the Cacodominus at the end of the Catalexis heresy, an event so catastrophic it may have soured them on psychic powers forever. The Templars themselves simply accepted as the Emperor's will. Without librarians to act as chroniclers, much of the chapter's early history has been lost, and the duty of record-keeping falls to a legion of scribes within the Hall of Records aboard their flagship. This flagship, the ancient battle barge Eternal Crusader, has become the spiritual heart of this fleet-based chapter. It is a mobile fortress monastery and a cathedral in the void, its vast halls filled with sacred reliquaries and trophies gathered over 10 millennia of constant warfare. It holds priceless artifacts from the Great Crusade itself, banners carried before the Emperor, a fragment of the First Aquila, and thousands of other holy relics. It is here that all Black Templars return to renew their vows before the next crusade begins. Their faith is expressed not just in prayer, but in action and ritual. For a Black Templar, martial training and ceremonial devotion are one and the same. When not in battle, they are preparing for it through prayer, fasting, and grueling training drills. They live an ascetic life, forgoing all but the bare necessities to purify themselves in the eyes of the Emperor and their Primarch. This is most visibly demonstrated in their martial traditions. On the eve of battle, many Templars bind their weapons to their gauntlets with devotion chains, a temporary vow of martial purpose that is only removed upon victory, a tradition Sigismund himself adopted from the World Eater's Legion during the Great Crusade. For some, this is not enough. A warrior may take a more permanent oath, securing his weapon and gauntlet together with a chain of zeal, a weld that is never to be broken. To be seen without his weapon in hand is the ultimate dishonor for such a warrior. This intense, all-consuming faith faces its greatest test when a Black Templar is seconded to the Death Watch. There, he must serve alongside warriors from 100 different chapters, and, most tryingly, alongside librarians. It is a particular hardship that requires immense discipline. Only a brother capable of containing his deep-seated intolerance can be chosen for such a duty. Even then, these Templars often spend every moment outside of combat, cloistered away in prayer, steeling their souls to endure the presence of the very psychers they are sworn to despise, all for the greater purpose of serving the Emperor and slaying the hated alien.